Okay, DFP Conversions, which stands for decimals, fractions, and percents. You've seen these types of questions before, so we're just going to go over it rather quickly. D stands for decimals, so that's what we're going to start with. You can take a decimal and you can change it into a percentage, or you can change it into a fraction. To change it into a percentage, as you can see, your numbers don't actually change. You're just going to multiply by 100. So 0.22 times 100 ends up being 22%. A fraction, you place it over the correct power of 10. Those powers of 10 are 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. It just depends on your place value. And then you always have to reduce. So 0.22 is in the hundredths place, so you place 22 over 100, and then you reduce. Both of those numbers can be cut in half, and you get 11 over 50. Here's another example I've got is 0.375, and you'll see that I actually did all the calculations here. 0.375 times 100, you get 37500, but because we have 3 decimal places, I've got 3 decimal places here, and you get 37.5%. 0.375, that's got 3 digits. It's in the thousandths place, so it goes over 1,000. Both of those numbers can be reduced by 125, and you get the fraction 3/8. Okay? I'm sure you're aware of the shortcut, but changing a decimal to a percent, which is what we just talked about, a decimal to percent, you can move your decimal 2 spaces to the right because your numbers don't actually change, you're just moving your decimal. And so if you move it 2 spaces to the right, it works, but the reason why it works is because you're multiplying by 100. So I've got a few examples here. 0.13 becomes 13%, 0.25 becomes 25%, 0.09, 2 spaces, becomes 9%. Here's another example, 0.875. Move it 2 spaces to the right, you get 87.5%. 0.875, that's in the thousandths place, so you put it over 1,000. It can be reduced by 125, and you get the fraction 7/8. I'm using mostly 8s on these notes because the test likes to do 3/8, 5/8, 7/8. Our next number is going to be a fraction, changing a fraction to a percentage and then a fraction to a decimal. I'm going to start with the decimal. I have told you before that a fraction is the operation of division. It's your top number divided by your bottom number, or your numerator divided by your denominator. Well, that's exactly how you do it. You change your fraction to a decimal by dividing. 3/8 means 3 goes underneath your bracket, 3 divided by 8. So if you've ever heard the top dog, the thing on top, the number on top goes in the doghouse. So top dog goes in the doghouse, if that helps you to remember which number to place underneath your bracket. So 3 divided by 8, obviously 8 won't go into 3, so you have to add your decimal, and then you divide it out like you normally do, and you get 0.375. And 3/8 into a fraction into a percentage, you have to divide the fraction just like we did over here, but then you multiply by 100 or use the shortcut 2 spaces to the right. So 0.375 is 37.5%. That is a fraction to a percentage and to a decimal. Next we've got percentages. You can take a percentage and change it to a decimal, or you can have a percent and change it to a fraction. The opposite of taking a decimal to a percent is taking a percent to a decimal. Instead of multiplying, you divide by 100. So if I've got 62.5% and I move that decimal 2 spaces to the left, or I divide by 100, you get decimal 625. Decimal 625. Now let's think about why it's divide. 62.5, 62, well that's over 50, you know, it's somewhere in between 50 and 100, but then it becomes 0.625. See the number? It's getting smaller. So remember, when we divide, your number gets smaller. If you have trouble remembering whether you're multiplying or dividing by 100, well, think about it. Is your number getting bigger or is it getting smaller? If it gets bigger, you're going to multiply. If it's getting smaller, like it does here, you divide. If you have a percent that you need to place put into a fraction, you put it over 100. Okay, 100 is the magic number anytime we deal with percentages, so you place it over 100. It doesn't matter whether it's 5%, 5 over 100. If it's 38, 38 over 100. If it's 5,000, you still place it over 100 if it's a percentage. Doesn't matter. Here I've using the same number, 62.5, so I place that over 100. We try not to have decimals in a fraction, although it is possible, but we try not to. So I multiplied both of my numbers by 10 to get rid of this decimal. So it's 625 over 1,000, which can be reduced by 125, where you get 5/8. Again, I'm going to mention the shortcut. Shortcut to percent to decimal is to move your decimal 2 spaces to the left because you're dividing by 100. Here are some examples. 12%, move it 2 spaces to the left, becomes 0.12. 25%, 2 spaces to the left, becomes 0.25. Here's where it gets a little bit trickier, like if you've got a single-digit percentage. 5%, well, your decimal's here, you move it 2 spaces to the left, you've only got 1 digit, so you have to hold that empty space with a 0. So 5% becomes 0.05. 8% becomes 0.08. Okay, so doesn't matter if it's only got 1 digit, your procedure still stays the same. Move it 2 spaces to the left, then you'll have to hold it with a 0. Your summary, we're going to do the summary in class, so you are finished with your notes.